You're standing at the mouth of a cave in what will one day be called southern France, 50,000 years ago. The temperature has dropped 15 degrees in 2 weeks. Behind you, 3 children share a single aurochs hide. In front of you, half a mile down the valley, there is smoke. Not your smoke. Someone else's fire, lit by people your kind has never learned to fully understand, and never will. That's the thing nobody talks about. Neanderthals didn't just survive ice ages, megafauna, and volcanic winters. For somewhere between 2,600 and 5,400 years, they shared a continent with anatomically modern humans, people who looked, thought, and hunted in ways that were startlingly similar to their own. And yet only one group made it out. So how did Neanderthals survive for as long as they did alongside early humans? And what finally broke the equilibrium? Neanderthals lived in Europe and Western Asia for roughly 400,000 years. 400,000 years of glaciers, cave bears, woolly rhinoceroses, and a climate that swung between extremes with no warning. By the time modern humans arrived out of Africa around 45,000 years ago, Neanderthals had already outlasted every climate catastrophe thrown at them. That context matters. These were not frail transitional creatures waiting to be replaced. They were specialists, extraordinarily well adapted to one of the harshest environments a large primate has ever inhabited. In 2013, Ju Zilho at the University of Barcelona published a landmark analysis of Neanderthal sites across Iberia, documenting evidence of ochre-stained shells used as personal ornaments at sites dated to at least 50,000 years ago, roughly 10,000 years before modern humans arrived in the region. The shells were perforated and pigment-coated, implying deliberate decoration. The hard number: some shells retained pigment concentrations of up to 60% sphalerite, a mineral with no nutritional or functional use whatsoever. Neanderthals weren't decorating themselves because humans taught them to. They were doing it on their own, which means the two groups who eventually met in Europe were more cognitively similar than almost anyone assumed. That cognitive overlap is where the story gets complicated. Here's where it gets strange. Everyone assumes the encounter between Neanderthals and modern humans was a one-sided catastrophe. Wave of humans arrives, Neanderthals collapse. The genetic evidence says something different. In 2010, Svante Pääbo's team at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig published the first draft sequence of the Neanderthal genome and found that non-African modern humans carry between 1% and 4% Neanderthal DNA. That number wasn't a rounding error. It was proof of sustained interbreeding, not a one-time event, but a pattern of contact that left a biological signature in every person of non-African descent alive today. Neanderthals and modern humans weren't just neighbors. They were, at least occasionally, partners. So what exactly did Neanderthals bring to that coexistence? Start with the body. Neanderthals were built differently, not worse, differently. Their skeletons show barrel chests. Shorter limbs relative to torso length, and nasal cavities anatomists estimate could warm and humidify Arctic air roughly 20% more efficiently than a modern human nose. Their leg bones bore stress fractures consistent with repeated high-impact thrusting, not long-distance running, but close-range struggle with large prey. Researcher Katie Poole and colleagues examining Neanderthal limb bones found injury profiles resembling those of modern rodeo riders, ribs, shoulders, heads, all consistent with grappling animals at proximity. The implication is almost uncomfortable. Neanderthals may have hunted by contact, spearing prey from 6 feet away rather than throwing from 60. That is not a failure of intelligence. That is a strategy optimized for a specific ecosystem, executed with extreme physical capability. And they were doing it with tools that were, by any honest measure, sophisticated. The Mousterian stone tool industry, associated almost exclusively with Neanderthals, produced flint points attached to wooden hafts using a multi-step adhesive process. In 2017, a study published in PLOS One, led by Paul Kozowiek at Leiden University in the Netherlands, demonstrated that producing birch tar, the adhesive Neanderthals used, required maintaining a fire at a precise temperature between 340 and 370 degrees Celsius. Not a fire.a controlled, calibrated fire. Kozowiek's team estimated this required a minimum of 3 distinct production steps, sustained over time with no margin for error. This is technology, not proto-technology, not precursor behavior. Technology, but there's a problem. Technology and physical prowess weren't enough. The archaeological record across Europe tells a story of Neanderthal populations shrinking, retreating, and finally vanishing, not all at once. but in a pattern of fragmentation that played out over several thousand years after modern humans arrived. In 2018, researcher Michael Stringer at the Natural History Museum in London, along with population geneticists, estimated that Neanderthal effective population sizes may have been as low as 3,400 to 3,900 breeding individuals at certain points, compared to modern human groups arriving with larger, more interconnected social networks. Small populations accumulate genetic load. Small bands lose members to injury, disease, or bad winters, with no one to replace them. Neanderthals may have survived 400,000 years of ice ages and megafauna only to be undone by the mathematics of population size. And here is the deepest twist. The very traits that made Neanderthals exceptional survivors likely made them brittle in the long run. Specialization for close quarters hunting in European cold forests gave them incredible short-term resilience. It may have also made expanding into new niches, warmer coastlines, open grasslands, different prey, harder than it was for the generalist modern humans arriving from Africa with broader dietary and technological repertoires. The same narrow specialization that kept them alive for 400 millennia may have been precisely what collapsed under the pressure of direct competition. Here's where it gets genuinely strange. Neanderthals apparently buried their dead. At Shanidar Cave in the Zagros Mountains of Iraqi Kurdistan, archaeologist Ralph Selecki documented in 1960 a Neanderthal burial site with flower pollen clustered around the body, a finding that sparked decades of debate about whether the burial was intentional and the flowers deliberate. The pollen controversy has never been fully resolved. But separate from Shanidar, excavations at La Farasse in the Dordogne region of France have produced multiple Neanderthal skeletons arranged in pits cut into the earth, with no evidence of carnivore disturbance, suggesting intentional interment. They placed their dead deliberately in the ground. Whether that act carried symbolic meaning or was purely pragmatic, no one knows. But the behavior itself belongs to the same category of acts that define what it means to be human. So step back. Take in the full picture. Neanderthals decorated their bodies before modern humans arrived to show them how. They controlled fire precisely enough to synthesize adhesives. They buried their dead. They interbred with the ancestors of every living non-African person on Earth. And they held their ground for somewhere between 2,600 and 5,400 years after the arrival of an expanding, cognitively flexible competitor. That is not the story of a failed species. That is the story of a people who were, in almost every meaningful sense, people, and whose disappearance was not inevitable, but contingent, the product of population pressure and ecological circumstance rather than any fundamental inferiority. Go back to that cave mouth, the smoke in the valley, the children under the hide. Whatever the other group had, larger networks, faster information spread, lighter projectiles that could kill from 40 meters instead of 4, they had something Neanderthals did not: numbers. And the flexibility that comes with them. Not better minds, not better hearts, just more of them, connected to more people, able to absorb a bad winter in a way a band of 12 cannot. The Neanderthals didn't lose because they were lesser. They lost because survival has never been about being the best. It has always been about being enough. And sometimes enough isn't enough.